In the quiet suburbs of Long Island, no one could imagine the dark secrets hiding behind the walls of an ordinary house. There, a young girl's life became ensnared in a predator's web, leading to 17 days of unfathomable horror. They called her the girl in the basement. Her name was Katie Beers, just a wisp of a child with bounced brown curls. At only 9 years old, she had known cruelty few adults could endure. Psychical and emotional trauma lurked around every corner of her fragile life. Abandoned by her mother, abused by her guardians, Katie's childhood was a landscape of pain she could not escape. Her only flicker of light was a family friend named John Esposito. To lonely little Katie, Esposito was a hero, a big brother for her to lean on. She could not have imagined the twisted darkness behind his smile. Katie came into this world on December 30th, 1982, born to Marilyn Beers, a young and unprepared mother in Mastic Beach, Long Island. Marilyn struggled with alcoholism and a string of unstable relationships, unable to provide Katie the care she desperately needed. By the time Katie was a toddler, Marilyn had all but abandoned her daughter, leaving the tiny girl adrift in a turbulent sea of uncertainty. Katie's salvation came in the form of Linda Inghilleri, her godmother, who took her into her Bayshore home. But behind closed doors, grave horrors lurked. Linda's husband, Sal Inghilleri, was a monster hiding in plain sight. To little Katie's horror, her so-called uncle began molesting her, his brutal assaults on her tiny body starting when she was just 2 years old. Too young to understand what was happening, gripped by fear and confusion, Katie suffered in silence for years. She tried to tell her godmother, but Linda refused to believe Sal could do such a thing. Instead of protecting Katie, she accused the little girl of lying and punished her cruelly. Alone and afraid, Katie retreated deep into herself, longing for the solace of a real childhood that she came to realize she might never have. Her only friend in those painful early years was John Esposito, a longtime family acquaintance Katie knew as Big John. To her, Esposito was a welcome grown-up friend in a world dominated by monsters wearing familiar faces. Esposito made her feel happy in a house full of horrors, giving her fleeting glimpses of normalcy with outings to her beloved Spaceplex amusement park. Katie had no reason to suspect Esposito's kindness masked a predator biding his time. She showered him with a lonely child's affection, unaware of the growing darkness behind his smiling eyes. By the tender age of 9, Katie's life had become an endless gauntlet of pain. The deck stacked irrevocably against her, she endured cruelty no child should ever bear. In the quiet suburbs of Long Island, behind friendly facades, a tempest was brewing. Soon it would be unleashed, threatening to swallow Katie whole and change her life forever. The abduction. The week after Katie turned 9, her body racked by fever, she prayed for the release death might bring. But fate had other plans, though at the time Katie could not imagine the horrors still in store. In the days leading up to Katie's 10th birthday, Esposito offered to take her on a special trip to celebrate the milestone so few believed she would reach. Katie bubbled with gratitude and excitement. The morning of December 28th dawned chilly and overcast, but to Katie, the day overflowed with promise. Esposito arrived bearing gifts, a colorful new dress, cake mix to bake. For a child starved of affection, his kindness meant everything. Around 3 p.m. they finished up decorating Katie's cake and set off for Spaceplex, Katie dressed proudly in her new jumper. Few remnants stand today of the amusement park that was once Katie's only oasis of childhood joy. But on that deceptive afternoon, the park teemed with carefree kids reveling in winter break freedom. Laughing children dashed about while haggard parents trailed behind. Pop songs blared as arcade games chimed in word. Under the vigilant eye of Big John, little Katie bounced gleefully from ride to ride, filled with temporary delight. As dusk approached, Esposito told Katie they should start heading home to meet Linda for her birthday dinner. Katie skipped happily back towards the parked van, cocaine-laced candy bars Esposito had given her lending a sparkling sheen to the world. But when they reached the van, Esposito suddenly scooped Katie's tiny body up and hurled her into the back. Katie's head cracked against the vehicle's metal wall and everything went black. When Katie woke, she found herself imprisoned in a tiny closet, her mouth sealed with industrial tape. Heart seizing with panic, she thrashed with all her might. The door burst open. Esposito's huge silhouette loomed above. Then Katie saw the knife glinting in his hand. Esposito dragged her along a hidden passage inside the closet wall, down a rickety staircase through the inky darkness. At the passage's end hung a trapdoor. Esposito heaved it open to reveal a windowless, dirt-walled chamber. He forced Katie down a wooden ladder to the hard earthen floor. There Katie saw a soiled mattress, a shelf lined with keys, and a tiny black and white TV, inside the nightmare dungeon Esposito had spent years meticulously crafting just for her. He chained the sobbing child to the wall, then left her there in the gloom. As Katie's eyes adjusted, she made out the outlines of a toilet bucket and hamper in the corner. She spotted a half-eaten candy bar and some dirty children's clothing on the floor. As the awful reality sunk in, Katie peered at the TV screen glowing faintly in the dark and glimpsed familiar faces, her own among them, flashing as Esposito flipped through news channels above. In the hours after Katie vanished, Esposito spun a web of lies to the searching officers. He claimed they had parted ways at Spaceplex hours before. Feigning concern, he joined Linda and Guillory, appealing tearfully to the public for information on television. Behind the scenes, police puzzled over baffling inconsistencies. Linda claimed she received a panicked call from Katie saying she was kidnapped by a knife-wielding man. But when the FBI enhanced the call's audio, the child's voice was revealed to be an eerie composite, the call staged. Detectives grew suspicious of Linda, Sal, and even Katie's estranged mother Marilyn, wondering if the abduction was fabricated to gain custody somehow. Or perhaps by someone wishing the disadvantaged child harm in order to silence her. Yet glaring clues pointed to Esposito. A Spaceplex janitor confirmed seeing Katie willingly leave with Big John before closing. Esposito had no alibi for the 2 hours prior to when he claimed dropping Katie off. When Esposito's name was run through criminal databases, a disturbing 1976 attempted kidnapping conviction came up, belying his supposed mentor status. While Lieutenant Dominic Vitrano and his officers continued investigating Katie's relatives, Esposito grew increasingly unhinged under 24/7 surveillance, his story morphing, details changing. He brazenly lied to police about his record despite Vetron having the documents in hand. 2 weeks passed without breaks. Vetron began fearing they would be recovering Katie's body, not finding her alive. Through it all, Linda maintained her innocence, even taking a lie detector test. But Vetron still believed secrets lingered in the family's shadows. The holidays dragged on without closure. Katie's picture smiled from telephone poles as the officers struggled to unravel the contradictions concealing her fate. Vetron vowed to continue the hunt, even if it lasted his whole career. No matter how elusive the truth, he would uncover what happened to Katie Beers. Alone in the unknown darkness, Katie refused to surrender hope. She knew she had to stay strong to survive this nightmare. As the hours stretched endlessly with no concept of day or night, Katie focused everything on staying alert and planning somehow to get word to the police inches above her prison. When Esposito returned to her cellar dungeon to assault her day after day, she unleashed an endless barrage of questions, trying desperately to plant seeds of doubt deep in his warped mind. She would ask things like, "Why won't you just let me go live a normal life? What am I supposed to do without family or school or friends? How long do you really think you can get away with this sick plan? Don't you feel any shred of guilt or remorse at all?" His cold, menacing answers sent bone-deep chills through her small battered body, but still she persisted. Esposito told Katie he had constructed this nightmare dungeon for one purpose only, to keep her as his personal captive forever. He wanted her to be the family that fate had denied him, and he would force her to play house no matter what. When she collapsed into terrified sobs, begging and pleading for her freedom, he slammed her fragile body ruthlessly against the hard earthen wall, snarling promises that she would die here alone, never to feel the sun again. But Katie had survived worse monsters before. Years of horrific abuse had forged her into a true fighter against all odds. She knew she could outsmart Esposito or die trying. While he was gone for hours above ground, she set her keen intelligence to studying every last detail of the dungeon, looking for any weakness or way to escape. She scrutinized how many footsteps from the hidden hatch door to her dingy mattress. She timed how long it took him to descend and climb back up the rickety ladder. She hid a key and small tools she found, anything to defend herself or break free. Endlessly resourceful, Katie spent painful hours on her knees, picking relentlessly at the seam where the mattress met the hard dirt floor, hoping to somehow pry it loose and find a way back to daylight. During the endless starving days where time blurred into one nightmare, Katie's terror slowly morphed to steely determination. She refused any food or drink Esposito provided, fearful of sedatives that might dull her ever-vigilant mind. She turned her only weapon, her intelligence, into an asset, manipulating Esposito to gain inches of trust or empathy. She played psychological games, vowing her hatred for her so-called family and pretending loyalty to him alone. Then she began complaining of illness, stifled coughs, imaginary pains, anything to make Esposito believe his prized captive was dying. Surely he would have to free her rather than watch his fantasy perish. As January 1993 dragged on with no breaks in Katie's case, Vetrano became haunted by nightmares of her lying lifeless somewhere dark and cold. He could barely recall the last time he slept. But his answer came at 4 a.m. on a tense early morning when Esposito's attorney phoned. "Get to my office immediately," the lawyer said. "My client has something shocking to confess about Katie Beers." Esposito spilled his soul, admitting to constructing an elaborate underground bunker hidden right below his garage solely to imprison Katie. Police were stunned at his elaborate plot as he revealed the harrowing bunker's concealed location, needing special equipment just to breach its entrance. Even Vetrano, a veteran cop who thought he had seen true evil before, recoiled, entering its depths at last on January 13th. The darkness inside felt consumingly evil. Except there, bewildered amid the contained nightmare, stood Katie. Rescued at last from an unimaginable 17 days of hell, she was thin and weak, but smiling her infectious smile. Vetrano swept Katie into his arms, flooded with relief for her deliverance from this house of horrors. As Katie was rushed to the hospital and Esposito to jail, Vetrano pledged he would not rest until her tormentor faced fullest justice. The trial against John Esposito was swift and severe once Katie testified to her prolonged agony. She spared no details from her days wasting away chained inside that coffin-like box beneath the monster's lair. Esposito displayed no remorse, seeming only to relish renewed control at facing his prize captive once more. His confident smugness infuriated the courtroom until jurors convicted him on every charge, sentencing Esposito to spend the rest of his dangerous life removed from society. Katie had triumphed. Katie's rescue reverberated across the nation, highlighting the monsters hiding in plain sight who threatened society's most vulnerable. Her innocence snatched away shook communities to the core, exposing the darkest evils lurking behind suburban walls. But while many expected such profound trauma to break Katie's spirit beyond repair, her incredible resilience proved the strength of human perseverance against all odds. Where most would have crumbled, Katie emerged wiser and more driven from the crucible, like a phoenix reborn. With Esposito's conviction, the justice Katie deserved was served at last. Her character prevailed while his vileness rightly dissolved into the infamous annals of criminals who underestimated their prey. Katie became a household name, idolized for refusing victimhood despite unthinkable torment. Removed into a loving foster home, Katie flourished with proper care, though she still struggled with emotional scars no child can quickly overcome. Nightmares of Esposito plagued her, but Katie found hope and purpose sharing her survival methods with other kidnapped children. She devoted herself to child advocacy, speaking out so her stolen voice could protect others. Now a thriving adult, Katie is celebrated as a hero who rewrote her own story, rising from captivity stronger than before. Through talks, books, and charity work, she continues shedding light so other victims feel less alone. Her defining hallmark is resilience, having discovered how very strong she could be when tested to the limits. Katie transformed trauma into empowerment, refusing to let evil claim victory of her life. Where she once dreamed of freedom locked underground, today Katie stands proudly in hard-won daylight, shining on. Katie's odyssey into the depths of horror and her soaring rise towards the light remains one of history's most incredible testaments to the resilient human spirit. Her story stands today as a lesson of hope blooming even from life's darkest valleys. What Katie endured remains almost beyond comprehension. Locked in a predator's claws, every freedom ripped away, she seemed destined to become another forgotten name added to the tragic tally of stolen innocence. But Katie refused surrender. She emerged from the crucible forged anew with unbreakable strength from having conquered the monster under every child's bed. Katie walked through fire and survived by wit, grit, and an uncanny ability to manipulate evil against itself. Her steel will turn trauma into power and now guides fellow survivors from shadows into light. When hope seems lost, Katie Beers shines the way home, reminding that heroes dwell within us all. She is the voice comforting every child who wonders if monsters can be beaten back. The battle belongs to the bold, Katie shows, offering her hand to lead them from the dark.